Welcome to the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Podcast. My name is Natalie Nidham. I'm a nutritionist, a human potential and epigenetic coach, and I created this podcast to bring you the latest ways to take control of your health and longevity. We cover it all, from new technology to ancestral health practices, personalized interventions, and a very special interest of mine, peptides. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, folks. Today's episode is for you if you or anyone you know has ever had any kind of sleep issues. I don't think I can think of a single person that I know who's not at some point or another had a sleep issue. So whether you have one right now or you just want to fill up your knowledge bank for the future, this episode is for you. My guest today is Molly McGlockin, the founder of Sleep is a Skill, which is a website, it's a program, and it's also a podcast. So there's Sleep is a Skill podcast and sleepisaskill.com is the website. And you can also find her on Instagram, just under her name, Molly McGlockin. I'll bet you, though, if you type in Sleep is a Skill, she'll pop up there as well. I had the pleasure of meeting Molly at the Upgrade Labs conference that I was at last week. And she was great to interview, but she's even more amazing in person. I really, really enjoyed connecting with her. She's incredibly knowledgeable and she's got amazing energy. So check it out. Let me know what you think. I always want to hear your comments. If you have any questions, let me know. If you're looking to connect with me, you can find me through my website, which is natnidham.com. You can find me on Facebook, which is on the Optimizing Superhuman Performance group. And you can also find me on Instagram, just under my name, Natalie Nidham. If you get value from this podcast, make sure that you leave us a review and maybe a comment, and definitely share it out with any of your friends, family, or networks who you feel would also get benefit from the episode. Disclaimer is that all of the information on this podcast is exactly that, just information. We're not diagnosing, treating any kind of disease. If you decide that you want to try a supplement or anything else that we talk about here, make sure that it's right for you. Make sure that you check with your doctor or your health professional and make sure that it's not going to kind of interact poorly with anything that you're already doing. I've covered all the bases. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you guys and enjoy the episode. Hey folks, before we launch into the episode, just one thing. We have a sponsor. drinkhrw.com. This sponsor is all about the magic of molecular hydrogen, and they make the most incredible molecular hydrogen products. They make molecular hydrogen tablets that you can easily just drop into your water every morning as you start your day. They actually even have flavored ones in raspberry flavor, if that's your jam. I like mine plain with a squeeze of lemon, but I also love the raspberry. They even have tablets that you can drop into your bathtub to get a whole body treatment of molecular hydrogen, and tablets you can drop into a bowl of water and apply to your face. And so you might be sitting there wondering, so big deal, why would I drink hydrogen? I mean, hydrogen is the smallest molecule on the periodic table. Who cares about hydrogen? Well, let me tell you, you care about hydrogen. A lot about what we talk about in this podcast is about health span and lifespan. It's about aging well. It's about longevity. It's about managing your body system so that you can look, feel, and perform your best. And molecular hydrogen delivers on these points like nothing else does. Think about this. Molecular hydrogen actually combats oxidative stress as well as supporting a healthy inflammatory response. Now, we know that inflammation is at the root of virtually every major disease out there. We also know that it makes us basically age faster. So I would qualify molecular hydrogen as a preventative aging supplement, and it is one of the easiest, healthiest, best out there with zero negative side effects. It indirectly mitigates the damages of those three issues that ultimately lead the way in virtually any disease state and fundamentally are the driving forces in why we age. We're talking imbalances in oxidative stress, in inflammation, and as well as increased insulin resistance. So you don't really have to take my word for it, guys. You can go to the drinkhrw.com website, and I'm going to tell you that it is one of the most incredible repositories of research and articles all about molecular hydrogen. And you know what I love about this company is they don't just run around telling you how great molecular hydrogen is. They don't just cherry pick the best research articles. They're full on, flat out, pretty honest about this article. This clinical trial, well, it didn't show us much yet. Here are the flaws in it, or here's what we think. It's an incredible resource, but I can tell you that whatever it is that you're dealing with, there's probably a clinical trial going on somewhere looking at whether or not molecular hydrogen can be helpful. And I will tell you that in my practice, I've seen it be helpful to all kinds of people. People who are suffering from joint pain, because molecular hydrogen is able to target inflammation, because it's able to support a healthy inflammatory response in the body. And it also promotes antioxidant and oxidative balance. You guys, you don't want to just be taking antioxidants by the handful. You want something on board that's going to help to keep you in balance, to not too high, not too low, just keep you in that Goldilocks state. So, like I said, I have clients who were blown away about how effective this molecular hydrogen, taking it every day, sometimes soaking an injured joint in molecular hydrogen water, what a difference it made in their mobility and in their ability to recover from their injuries and even also, of course, from workouts. So you're going to be hearing me talk a lot more about molecular hydrogen in the future. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I encourage you to go to drinkhrw.com/superhuman, and you can use promo code longevity10, and that will get you 10% off everything that you purchase. And you can try molecular hydrogen for yourself. And by all means, reach out to me and let me know how you liked your molecular hydrogen experience. And by all means as well, please, please, please check out their website. It is one of the most incredible resources that I've seen for molecular hydrogen research. So thanks for being here today, guys. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to the show, Molly McGlockin. It is such a pleasure to meet you in person.
Yes, it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm so grateful to be here. This is awesome.
Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, I've been, I think you came onto my radar a few months ago through a couple of other people that we have in common. And and I'm always looking at your work and going, wow, this is like, I can't wait to get her on the show. And then when you said yes, I was like, oh my God, she said yes.
Oh, well, the feeling is mutual. Love the work you're doing. And I think, we were just sharing before this too, that then once we were both involved in that kind of promo for BioStrap and some of the work that they're doing, just a cool way to be connected and excited to dive into more.
Yeah, no, amazing. I'm stoked about this. So Miss Molly, why don't you tell us a bit about first of all, I love the line, sleep is a skill, because sleep is a skill. And, as a mom with our babies, we don't actually have to teach them, but we have to get out of the way so they can teach themselves how to sleep. But somewhere along the line, so many of us lose this skill of being able to go to sleep for any number of reasons we can both come up with. But I'd love to hear about what drove you to this particular area of health optimization, which we both know is, I think it's at the top. If not number one, it's tied for one.
Yes, I completely agree. Now, of course, I am biased because as you'll hear in my story, my background, the reason I got into this was really to solve my own problem that I was dealing with my sleep. So what that looked like was for most of my adult life relating to my sleep as a lot of labels like, oh, I'm a night owl, I'm a short sleeper, it's in my genes, a lot of these kind of fixed ways of being around sleep, and thought that was just how it was. There's not much more to look at around that. That's the story. And then living as a, serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends, starting to have my already sort of maladaptive sleep patterns get more and more extreme. So, I'm starting to go to bed even later. Now it's midnight, it's 1 o'clock, it's 2 o'clock. Oh, you know what? Sun's rising. But it doesn't matter because I'd be justified and righteous that, well, I can sleep in and, Yeah. That's how my life is set up. No problem. Didn't start to notice when I was starting to get more and more symptoms around, say, even my cycle, my hormones, more painful periods, more anxiety, sick more often, got the beginnings of an ulcer, all of these things start kind of stacking, shingles. Like I was getting some stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
serious signals
there's some
here.
signs, right? So
your body's like, hello.
Yeah, exactly. And then, but it wasn't really until I went through my own period of insomnia while traveling internationally that really it was just like you couldn't ignore it anymore. And what it really marked for me in where I'm standing in my life right now, that was one of my rock bottom, basically, is what that looked like. And it was a time of the symptomology of all the things that weren't working in my life then really came out through that, what felt like this inability to sleep, and, night after night. And really it felt maddening. Like it felt like, oh my God. And is this forever? Like the line of thinking in my brain. And often when we are sleep deprived, our thinking patterns do go a bit awry. And it was certainly this catastrophic thinking of, oh my God, this is buckle in, because this is how it's going to be forever. It was kind of how I was thinking. And so, at its lowest point, I went to the doctors in Croatia with Google Translate. I'm like, help, I can't sleep. And leave with a prescription of their version of Ambien and end up having, going through from there to Budapest and to Italy, with different prescriptions. So each time they would, the thinking was like a short-term amount each time, but then it was, a blend of Valium, Xanax, and Ambien at all different points. And then just a total fear of, okay, so one, these aren't really actually working that much anyway, because I was so, the anxiety levels were so high. So it would just kind of get me to sleep, but then I'd have mega fragmented sleep throughout the course of the night, and I'm waking up and it just, it was a lot. And so,
but then it was like a nightmare. Only sleeping.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it felt like. And then it also felt like, then I have this new concern of how will I get off of these things, and feeling so connected to them at the same time, like this kind of love-hate of I need them. But now I'm entangled with them. Like how does that all work? Yeah. So it was actually, it was such a problem because it just felt like I couldn't fulfill on the work that I needed to do. Like it really changes the whole game when you're not sleeping like that. So we'd actually come back from our trip early and went back to New York to kind of figure out this sleep thing. And from that place, what was missing for me was a sense of, I kept saying like, why is there no sleep AA or sleep support group or somewhere to go? I need to talk to people, and because there was also just such shame and how can I not do this thing that's so, you would think, a given for every human, this ability to sleep. So flash forward, I'm quite an obsessive personality. It's probably part of the reason why I was having such issues with sleep. But on the plus side of it, went down the rabbit hole and then tested and tried so many things to make a difference with my sleep. And out of that process, once got it to see kind of what works, what doesn't work, and got to see once I restored that level of homeostasis to my sleep, which, as I shared, wasn't even that great before, but got it to the baseline, but then got to go into this whole world of optimization and really experiencing sleep that I never thought possible for myself was amazing and really just transformative, changed my whole life. And even to have now we're privileged to have this opportunity to have a quantifiable kind of tracking system of our sleep, so we can actually see what are these numbers, where do we fall, what is working, what's not working. And so now I just have years and years of data of understanding, the ways that we can make a difference with our sleep. And so out of it, once that happened, I could not stop talking about it, and it just became like this organic thing, and started working with people because I was so empathetic for other people that were dealing with that, because I knew how much it, changed my life. So And then it built and grew into now we have, we've had a weekly newsletter for a bunch of years. We've had weekly podcasts now more recently within the last about year and a half. And then small groups, one-on-one. We have online course, 90-day course that we have on more of a private and cohort model for that. And then we're about to be launching a kind of DIY version as well. So just this whole world got kind of grown out of that. But at the same time, it's all rooted in exactly what you said is this context of sleep being a skill, because I think that that's the real paradigm shift versus like you're either good at it or bad at it, or these binary kind of ways of thinking. And it opens up a new possibility for all of us to, no matter where we're at, no matter how good we think we are at sleeping or poor, and we don't think about it, it brings about this new world of kind of education, insight, experimentation.
Yeah, I love it. And, it's interesting. There's what you say about sleep as a skill. And I find the other thing that I see a lot of, both in my Facebook community and in my practice, there's this hero attitude about sleep. Oh, I don't need much sleep.
Yes.
Right. Oh, I do great on 5 hours, or I only need 4.5. And this idea that we're wasting time when we're sleeping.
Yes.
And I've been a victim of that, more not a victim.
Same.
I've had that story, right? Oh my God, I don't have time. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, you're going to be dead pretty soon if you don't sleep, right? Let's remind ourselves that sleep deprivation is a form of torture, which anybody who's had major sleep issues will say absolutely. And the other thing that you said that I really picked up on is how we catastrophize when we're not sleeping. Everything at 3:00. There's nothing worse than going through, you have some major stress in your life. There's nothing worse than waking up at 3:00 in the morning and ruminating on that thing, because I find that it explodes, right? Like it amplifies. It's so much worse. And with experience, you can maybe talk yourself down and say, well, it's because it's 3 a.m. It's going to feel worse than it actually is. But at the same time, there's this thing that happens in the night when you're supposed to be sleeping. So why don't we talk a little bit about how you help people to get out of this? Because I find we're going to talk about the hard skills and the supplements and all that stuff. But that mind game that happens when people can't sleep, like where they really, and as you said, once it becomes a problem, then the problem becomes the problem, because you're anxious about not sleeping, which of course exacerbates the problem. So why don't we talk a little bit about how you're able to kind of coach people or help people kind of through that first obstacle in a way?
Yes. So well said too, that last part about we become anxious about not sleeping. I mean, when I was at my worst, the sun would be setting and my heart would start like racing, like, oh my God, it's going to be another long night of not sleeping. Like, how am I going to get through this night? And so you're absolutely right. It became like its own form of sleep anxiety. And with that, it's how do you unravel all that? So we really lean into 2 key frameworks. So one, we call the sleep tripod. So workability between psychology, physiology, and environment, and starting to really take an assessment of out of that pie chart. And of course, they're all very much interconnected, but starting to see, are there certain key things that out of that, those slices of the pie, are there ones that are more egregiously, not working than the other ones? So we can start to zoom in on those 3, but of course, working in tandem with all of those. Examples of each one of those, of course, psychology, there are times when there's like an acute experience. It's kind of what was happening for me. It was this bubbling up and then this acute experience of we were going to be traveling the world and we had a one-way ticket. And so we're going to be digital nomads, very Tim Ferriss style. And it didn't go that way. Yeah, exactly. And now we got a problem. So that kind of acute experience. And then there are, other people that are dealing with, they lose their job, there's divorce, there's a death, there's some of those. And then also what I see is just kind of chronic stress that has been present for many, many years. women going through different periods of perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, and now relating to their sleep in some maladaptive ways. And unfortunately, because now they've experienced, and for some people that I never had a problem with my sleep, and now, oh my God, I can't get through the night, and et cetera, et cetera. I also deal with a lot of poker players and, different athletes, but particularly poker players. And because they have a bit of like a shift work almost experience that they're going through, and a lot of the mental game and the stressors that come about with that. And so lots of different groups that might have that persistent stress. So we're getting up under what part of that is working, not working. We create something called the sleep sabotagers. So it's looking at really all areas of life, giving a self-assessment across the board and seeing which areas are kind of not working as well as we'd like it to, and bring about a lot of accountability and kind of behavioral change elements there. Then we're also looking at the physiology aspect of things. So a lot of testing and understanding, are there certain things that are just, no matter what you're doing for kind of this, thought therapy approach, if whatever, your vitamin D and magnesium and all of these are just egregiously low, iron, thyroid, all of these things, just common or more kind of nuanced, what could be happening there. And that also leads us into environment, where sometimes the environment can be affecting our sleep results, whether, mold, air quality. But then more, I would say not more common, but often very common is just a lifestyle that so many of us are having, particularly in like, Western environments where we're living sort of these 24-hour cycles, and how much just even getting your light right can make such a difference.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've spoken a lot about this. So leaning into some of those things that can make a difference environmentally. So that's one framework. The second framework is looking at circadian rhythm entrainment and how to entrain and strengthen that circadian rhythm. I think that can also be really empowering too for many of us, is knowing that our circadian rhythm isn't just this like fixed static state. It's dynamic and it exists on the spectrum. And you can either be on the weaker side of that circadian rhythm or the stronger side. And to strengthen our circadian rhythm, we want to start moving us over on that side of the spectrum towards that strengthening side. And what that ends up looking like on the other side of things is, the friend that we all might know that no matter how late everyone was up, they're still getting up at the same time that they always do, or that they, just have such levels of automaticity in their body and their kind of functionality. That's really what we're, people complain about that. But often that's really what we're looking to create 7 days a week consistently. And the things that go into that, I think many people are surprised, some of those things that you can do to strengthen that circadian rhythm.
So why don't we talk about that a little bit? Because
Sure.
I'm a huge proponent of that. Like, I've always been a person, it doesn't matter what time I go to bed, I'm going to be up within a half-hour window, 90% of the time. And to your point, I used to be like, oh, I wish like I was like all my friends. I wish I could sleep in. I actually hate sleeping in because I feel like I've wasted half the day, which I kind of have. Right?
Yeah. And that quality comes into question of what that sleep even was. Yeah,
exactly. And I think actually, so there's a couple of questions. So one is I've got my ways of strengthening circadian rhythm, but I want to hear about yours.
Yeah.
But do you also talk about at all what is happening? One of the ways that I like to encourage people to really work on their sleep is to talk about what's happening while you're sleeping. Because this idea that waste is a sleep of time.
Yeah.
When people start to really kind of embrace all of the things that are happening while they're sleeping. And I mean, I'm in a space of anti-aging, longevity, vitality, health span.
Sure.
If you're not sleeping, you're aging.
Yes.
You're running down the clock a lot faster, right?
Yes.
So
two parts about that. One, I loved how you kind of opened with the, that it could quite possibly be number one. And that's really the argument that we're making, is that there's this, basics over biohacks. And we talk about basics, that there's an argument that sleep really belongs on the foundational first rung of that pyramid. And even just pragmatics, if we think about when we are sleep deprived, glucose levels rising, just, element so that it's going to just, everything's more harder to be healthy, to have this health and well-being element of things. Because now when our glucose levels are higher, now we're going to be craving more of those things. We're going to have to be exercising way more levels of willpower, especially, that's like, we're talking a day or two. If you apply that over years and decades, for some people, you're just, creating an uphill battle for even the choices of food that you're leaning into, but then even the effects of all the exercise that you might be aiming to lean into. So the ability to, actually reap the benefits of that on a nightly basis. And just, again, pragmatics, that if we didn't get that sleep, what's one of the first things that's going to get cut? Oh, okay, I got to snooze. I'm going to miss the gym. I'm going to make poor choices with the food. I mean, these are just like things that we kind of know if we really think about. But so I think one of the things that we do with our course is we get people grounded in the why to begin, because like any behavioral change, if we aren't grounded in that why, and if we aren't kind of reflecting on that why periodically, we tend to default to what's familiar. So like really, really looking at why is this important? Why did you choose to make this difference and lean into this concept that sleep is a skill? Okay, so if I'm going to learn a skill, it doesn't happen overnight. If we're going to learn piano, we don't have an expectation that we're just amazing right out of the gate. So, kind of creating that frame for how we're going to approach this. So having that why is crucial. And, there can be different ranges of this. So there are, like you're speaking to too, some of the people that are in the group that think that this isn't that important. I will say a lot of the people that I'm dealing with are clear that it's pretty important because they've been struggling. Yeah.
They've come to you. It's come to their attention.
Yeah, it's come to that point. So I will say that I usually do have that going, but there are always those experiences where they think that they're committed, and then the opportunity to go out with the friends until 2-3 a.m. or then it's important until it's not, until other options are there. So that why becomes so important. I'm glad that you pointed to that.
Yeah. And I find, the harder, going out with the friends is a huge issue. Yeah. But then you also get the people who they just can't bring themselves to go to bed. Yeah. Right? They can't bring themselves to turn off the TV, to shut off the phone, to stop playing games, to whatever the case may be. And, helping these people to understand and I love what you just said, like the why becomes so critical. Because once we can really connect people to why this is important, how this may be holding them back from reaching all the other goals that they may have, be they just even physical appearance or performance, whether it's cognitive or physical. And we talk about athletes who sleep 12 hours a night, right? Mm-hmm. And these guys are super performers, and starting to help people to connect to why is this so important, but then bringing it back to why is it important to you?
Absolutely. And, and it's not to make it wrong for anyone that's, kind of oscillating, because I was that example of someone that didn't have that why, or that was justified and righteous, like, oh, well, it is so it is. So I've seen that.
I'm just like this.
I'm just, don't try to get me to do anything else. That's how it is. So I've seen all sides of it. And it really did, for me, being stubborn, did take, really reaching that rock bottom period to really get, okay, now I've seen what life looks like without sleep, and it is not pretty. So I am just not interested in that reality. And so that is helpful to have that really strong why. And other people, we might all be dealing at different levels of that commitment, and it might wane, or it might come and go and what have you. But I think you're absolutely right. So it's important for us to, with any behavioral change that we're making, because I am asking people to make a number of behavioral changes, and we know historically for habit change that the expectation that people are going to be, hitting this out of the park day one is just not reality, because there are so many habits, and we can get into those too. So when leaning into that circadian rhythm entrainment, there's kind of a top-down approach of the things that can make the biggest difference for strengthening that circadian rhythm. And so that's how we kind of stack things, is that we start with the biggest fundamental. Like if you did nothing else, then this would make a difference for your sleep, for overall consistency of strengthening that circadian rhythm. And then we kind of titrate down from there. And we're looking to stack practice and then bring in high levels of accountability and multiple touch points throughout that endeavor. So for us, we do it for a 90-day period. Everyone's wearing an Oura ring that we work with as of right now in 2021. That's what we have people utilize. So we have an ongoing dashboard. So every single day we have that connectivity to see what's working, what's not working, and kind of course correct. They have sleep bots so that we're, connecting with the experience of what happened day in, day out, so that we can kind of pattern spot. Because often there are some reliable things that are coming up and again, but that might not be kind of brought to the surface. But from that top-down approach, the first one, and for anyone listening, this would be my hope that if you did get nothing else out of everything that we're talking about, that just leaning into the first one being most important for circadian rhythm and training, being light.
And so glad you said that. I was
light. And what's so cool about this area, I think, is that it gives those of us that are struggling with our sleep a new focus and a reframe that takes us out of just focusing on the night. When I was dealing with my sleep issues, right, it was like, okay, what do I do? Just kind of wait until the night comes. And now the night comes, I had like a whole stack of things that I had my eye mask, my books, my, my little lights. And like, I had a whole thing, I'm going into battle, and like that was
shockingly, you're not falling asleep.
Right. Exactly. Right. Amazing. Right. Can you believe it? And so when with that approach, that tends to be, often a failing strategy based on if you're dealing with that level of sleep anxiety, what have you. So shifting the focus to like, all right, we're really not, we're going to be moving our focus to the day and how we're running the day, how we're managing the day, or stress levels throughout the day, a number of things, how we're eating, timing, all of these things. And this is all in a domain of chronobiology. So really looking at the science of time and its effects on our biology. So what we get to then do is shift to, we're going to start looking at from the minute we wake up, or, hopefully if we've slept throughout the night, but from that start point of your day, that we're getting outside, that we're getting that morning sunlight, getting that directly in our eyes, most importantly, because of its, that connection to our suprachiasmatic nucleus and that master clock in our brain, so that can routinely and reliably kind of reset that master clock, which you really need to do largely every day. There is a bit of an averaging out effect, if one day you're not out quite as long or what have you, but the goal is to have that level of consistency, so that averaging out works in our favor. So you want to be doing that first thing, and anchoring, known as sunlight anchoring. We're looking to anchor that on the first half of our morning, most importantly. So if you've been hearing rumblings about this need to get outside, get that sunlight, but you're kind of like, where do I fit this in my day? If you're leaning into doing that in lunch and noontime, great, but that's not actually going to make the difference that we're looking to make. We really need to have it anchored on the first half of the day. And that's also a different type of light. So it's, because the morning light is more rich in infrared light, just because of the stretching of where the sun is on the horizon. So leaning into that is just going to really signal to the body we're, suppressing any lingering issues of melatonin, leaning into a healthy amount of cortisol, because we do want that in the morning in a healthy level to, give us that energy to get through the day. And so with that, we want to have that consistency 7 days a week being the difference too. I think so many people hear that and they're like, oh, okay, I'm pretty good during the weekday. Yeah, I got this. And then forget about those weekends. And then we have people creating that social jet lag, which I think needs a new name because, we saw during the pandemic that There wasn't much socializing.
Yeah, exactly.
It was just self-created jet lag. It was like Netflix jet lag. It was, phone jet lag. It was whatever. So we really want to be seeing what could life be like if we were doing this 7 days a week. And that can often be one of the most transformative things that I've seen for people too, is like, oh my God, I thought I was good-ish with consistency, but now bringing that in on Friday, Saturday, Sunday as well, or what have you, that's a whole new reality. And it's a whole new way of relating to themselves and the management of their days, but then getting to really have an experience of, oh my God, I get to actually feel reliably recovered each morning, which is a new space to be in. Because I think what people don't realize too is when we are sleeping in on the weekends, then not only is there that jet lag, there's even the metabolic jet lag. Then you don't even know when you're hungry at different points, and your bowel movements are at different points. All of these things shift, and of course those hormones, but not only is it happening that weekend, but then now Monday and Tuesday, it's like those effects of jet lag when we're trying to then get back on track. You're just starting to get back on track midweek, and then you're going to do it all over again, or some version of that. So if you're listening and you're like, well, I'm not like a 9 to 5er. It's even if that is the case, we might have some version of that that we've created ourselves.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and with that, there's so much that we can do even from a regularity standpoint. So first, most important being that light, and of course, on the flip side being darkness. So you can't have the light without the darkness. So we'd want to have really leaning into cultivating more darkness than I think a lot of us are. And since melatonin is known as the hormone of darkness, then in order to really create naturally the amount of melatonin that we need to not only get us to fall asleep, but to stay asleep, then we need to really lean into levels of darkness that many of us are not really cultivating. So that can be a transition from, shifting our environment. We have people take pictures or video of their sleep environment, so we can do a real before and after of seeing kind of the difference that they make. Yeah. So all of that to kind of get that set up on the front end, and to have yourself know what can make the difference in your environment. So if you are, traveling a lot or in different spaces, so that those spaces can pretty much reliably have some of those key fundamentals consistently.
Yeah, no, and the darkness is so interesting. So two things actually that came up is, one, how do you feel about sunglasses? Because I'm constantly arguing with my clients about, I know they make you look cool. However, they're messing up your sleep.
Yes. Oh my God. Totally. I know.
And, and in getting people to get outside first thing in the morning, for me, it's as simple as drink your coffee outside, stick your head out the window. If you live in a high rise, figure it out. Just get your eyes outside some way, somehow. And whether that's middle of the winter and that happens to coincide with your cold exposure, or, this whole idea of sunglasses may look cool, but they're not your friend. I find it's hard, right? Because I think I've saved thousands of dollars over the last X number of years that I've stopped wearing sunglasses in not having to buy new sunglasses that I keep losing.
Yes. Oh my God. Totally. Okay. So I have a couple of things about that. One, 110%. And I've had these very similar conversations as well. So what I'll say about that is, unequivocally in those morning hours, I love what you said about sticking your head out the window. Like sometimes these things are going to look weird. And we are asking people to do things outside of the bell curve of what most people are doing. So, even that can have further habit change resistance. So, but more the education of the why. So when we share with people that in certain studies, standing behind a window can take anywhere from 50 to 100 times longer in certain studies to reset that master clock, can start to give a reasoning of, okay, so just pragmatically, let's get ourselves outside. It's not a linear way of looking at those numbers. It's not just like, okay, we'll stand 50 to 100 times longer in front of, behind that window.
Really?
It doesn't quite work like that.
And you're damaging your skin, by the way, because
by the way, exactly.
By the way.
Yes, exactly. So, just the pragmatics of it, say like, okay, fine. So let me get myself outside. And then when you are outside, exactly, you want to, because the most important element of this is for in this conversation is getting that sun in the eyes. And then of course, the other important elements of vitamin D on the rest of the skin. So you don't want to be having, baseball hats, long clothing, turtlenecks or any of those sort of things. You want to get as much of that sunlight as you possibly can. So leaning into that, and absolutely sunglasses are not going to work in that. So the other thing that I would share is the only thing about that is that I had gotten, pretty much I'd always say burn your sunglasses. Ha ha ha. I do live in Vegas and right now.
Oh yeah.
So
well, there's a time and a place.
So I will say that there are certain driving, certain things. I have had to kind of get a little less strict, at least in the, when we're talking about the afternoons. One, different groups, a lot of people that I work with are lean into Andrew Huberman. If you've heard of him, great podcast, lots of resources. And I'll credit him with his kind of calling or noting of the afternoon of your circadian dead zone. And so meaning that there's of all this time that we're leading into telling, because really everything we're doing is aiming to tell the body what time it is, because it is trying to figure out what time it is all throughout the course of the day. And that afternoon, while there's benefits, of course, for getting outside, getting that sunlight, there's lots of other reasons, but for the circadian element of things, it's a bit of that dead zone in that afternoon is part of that thinking from certain studies leaning into the why of that. So if you are driving during that time, I've had to make allowances. We actually just went to Disney just this past week. And so I had to go to Uniqlo and get myself some $20 sunglasses. I didn't even have sunglasses. And I'm like, this is a no joke, Florida in the summer. All right, got it.
It's a thing.
But largely, so what we want this to be is like a sort of the piece of the pie, like a rare time when you are, if you do wear sunglasses, that it's a very rare experience for the most part, just, for safety reasons, driving or any of those sort of things. Yeah. But besides that, the mornings, there is really no need for them. And when you think of a ancestral perspective, we didn't have them. I mean, we just didn't have them for so long. Thing. Yeah.
Well, there's this study that I don't know if it's a study or an experiment that someone did where they took a bunch of people who had self-declared themselves as night owls. They're like, you know what? I cannot fall asleep or go to sleep until midnight. And you probably have heard of this. And they took them camping. University of Colorado. Took them camping. No phones, no flashlights, no nothing. And shockingly, within how long did it take? Nothing, like less than a week.
It was very short time. Yeah.
They were all snoozing by like 9 o'clock or 9:30, like their body had completely, and it's that constant exposure. And of course, nirvana to circadian reset would be to watch the sunrise and the sunset, because you've now, to your point of anchoring, you've now allowed that information to come into the brain about where exactly it is in that whole cycle of the day.
Yes.
But I've said that to so many people. I actually have a question for you. When you work with people, do you look at their genetics at all?
Yeah, we do. Actually, we're starting to lean into company Wild Health as well for another kind of add-on as well. But yeah, that can be really important. But also one of the things that, because I love that you just mentioned that study, because that study is so important to this conversation of labels. Again, I mentioned my own labels before I dealt with my sleep. And then one of the things that I've seen a lot of people lean into, sometimes at their own detriment, are the labels of chronotypes. And now chronotypes, now this can be a bit controversial because certain people will lean into, there's a genetic predisposition, and that very well there's certainly a whole conversation around that for sure with legitimacy. But I think that study among a number of others of kind of circadian rhythm entrainment point to that there's a lot that can be done for all of us, despite having those really hard and fast statements that, I'm a night owl, that's how it is, I'm most productive, I'm this, a whole reality that's built around that kind of way of being. And once we start bringing in that level of consistency, regularity, and really getting that light right, but not even the light. The second most important thing for circadian rhythm entrainment is temperature and different elements of temperature. And temperature can be influenced by a number of things, including, the types of meals that we're eating, the time that we're eating those, exercise type, thoughts even, which is really fascinating, of impacting our temperature. But so there's all, and of course, drugs, alcohol, THC, caffeine, all of these other things, and then prescription drugs that can affect body temperature and that circadian optimization. But there's so much of that I think so many of us don't even know what it looks like to have such levels of consistency, like that study brought about, that natural anchoring and tethering to the rhythms of nature. And once we do that, it's really quite fascinating, the difference that can bring about. And part of the thinking with this chronotypes is that I think some of us might not think of how we might exaggerate the thinking of what the difference would be, right? So it's like we make it, oh, I'm a night owl, so no big deal that I go to bed at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. Whereas the difference might not be that large from an ancestral perspective.
Yeah, that's such a great point, actually, that a night owl actually from an ancestral perspective might be 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Whereas, right, as opposed, and so I think that's great. No, I brought up the genetics also because one of the things I do is I look at people's genes, and I would say that in all the genetic panels I have run over the last few years, and it's now, a lot of them, I've come across like an infinitesimally small number of people that are not genetically wired to wake up in the morning and go to bed at a decent hour at night. I think I've come across one single person who actually carried the DEC2 gene, which is that DEC2 gene is the short sleeping gene, right? So these people literally only sleep maybe 4 or 5 hours a night. But I actually read an article not that long ago about a woman who had that gene. It was a massive issue for her because as we age, we naturally sleep less.
Yes.
And her life was becoming like a problem because she was only able to get like 3 hours or 3.5 hours of sleep a night. So I think that whole genetic story, it's very interesting.
Important.
Again, it's part of the stories we tell ourselves. But even the idea, of melatonin, and some people processing melatonin more slowly than others, or others more quickly, like understanding that melatonin is a hormone that is natural, that you have been gifted with naturally.
It's
a thing.
It's a thing. And that in certain countries, you can't come across it so easily.
Right?
You can get prescriptions and you have to, it's not just, in every, even available for kids when they have a cold and this, that, and the other. I mean, the prevalence and the kind of lax nature that we talk about, really hormone supplementation is really very, very interesting and something to consider and look at. I mean, I just was speaking with a client just yesterday. We're doing an onboarding and, how much melatonin you're taking? 40 milligrams each day. And some people will lean into these really high dose of melatonin. There's even suppositories. There's all kinds of things that you can do, of course, for melatonin. And yet I think it just is really something to consider. There are two camps. Some people, say that, of course, high dose melatonin, no big deal. And then there's another camp that has concerns around what that is, what that could be doing over the long-term effects. So something to consider, but I love what you're speaking to about the, what could be a rarity of this, short sleeping element of things, and that it maybe is not even that advantageous. Some people might say, they'd be excited about that prospect or think or hope and hold on to that they have that. And I used to be one of them. I used to really think that it was, personal development, want to lean into mind over matter. And I would think, okay, well, just, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's just kind of a mental game thing. And that was something that I leaned into in my, youth, and thought that made sense. And I think that was a bit more of a prevalent narrative happening. And now I really am excited for this period of time when, particularly with sleep tech, I think it's part of the process that's making such a difference for people that maybe wouldn't have been interested in this topic previously. They start tracking and then are alarmed by the results, and now they're motivated to make a difference with this area newly.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, the melatonin story is interesting, and we don't have to dig into it too much, but I know that, when we get into the higher doses, there are physicians that are using it, but not so much for sleep necessarily.
Yes.
Or they'll use it. at high dose. I actually did this recently with a client. I had her taking a very high dose first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
And what was happening is it was helping her circadian cycle to reset in a way. Her husband said to me, in all the years I have been married to this woman, I've never seen her pop out of bed quite the way that she is right now.
Oh, that's life-changing. That's amazing.
Like,
yeah. And so I'm glad you pointed to that because it's important.
Strategically, strategically, there's different ways and different reasons to use melatonin.
Yeah, there's some really exciting studies with certain types of cancers and high dose melatonin. There's a case by case basis with this, but I think all of it points to that it is a powerful thing to lean into. So having that awareness and a real framework by which we're bringing this in versus just and I think many of us, and again to keep using myself as an example, I was someone that thought, well, it's a supplement. What's the big deal? Oh, okay. I need to get a good night of sleep. So let me take double, like just the willy-nilly approach to that. And so when you have someone that is trained by your side to kind of bring in a strategy and can monitor and make this difference, that's a whole other, conversation.
Absolutely. So let's talk a bit about napping.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much we could talk about. I've got a list of things. We're not going to get through all of them. But actually, you know what? We were talking beforehand about this client of mine who has restless leg syndrome, which is, next to insomnia. It's not as common, I don't think, as insomnia. But again, restless leg syndrome, people think, oh, it's just a twitchy leg, but it can really be it can be catastrophically disruptive to people's sleep in a worst case scenario. So, and there's very little that conventional medicine has to offer for it. Unfortunately, that really works.
Yeah.
But I started off with napping, and that's because this client I have who has RLS, is essentially forced to nap during the day, and he's all stressed. He's like, well, if I'm napping during the day, how am I ever going to get to sleep at night? And it's like, well, if you're only sleeping an hour and a half at night, it becomes survival. It's a little bit like having to, at some point, sometimes when you haven't slept for too long, taking a sleeping pill, because even getting knocked out, which is not as optimal as falling asleep naturally, is going to be better. But or for a period of time. It's the problem with the sleeping pills is you become dependent on them, and then the quality of sleep isn't as great, blah, blah, blah. Yes. But let's go back. Napping, RLS. Go.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, totally. Okay. So the napping conversation, it's been called this napping paradox because there can be different groups that might benefit from naps and different groups that might not, but largely leaning into the positives of napping. Going under this umbrella of adenosine. So, one of the ways that I describe adenosine to people is, you're waking up in the morning and you've got this like empty hourglass. And then throughout the just existence of living, you got these little pieces of sand, and think of them as adenosine, kind of coming down throughout the course of the day, just throughout our day. And then you get, say midway through the day, there's a couple ways that you can influence, or common ways that you can influence adenosine. One of them being caffeine, to kind of just confuse your brain's ability to know that there's all that, sand in that hourglass. And so it doesn't think that it's there. So leaning into that, or adenosine actually dumping a little bit of that out so that you feel a little less tired, and that can be achieved by napping. And so with napping, then we're often trying to get a bit of that fine line so that we're not dumping too much of that adenosine out, so that by the time you get to the end of your day, that you still have that kind of bubbling up of that sand, so that it's so at the top where you're like, have that sleep pressure, so that you want to really go to sleep. And that can be part of the problem when I will have people that have, especially I'll see this as people post-retirement and what have you, they're starting to lean into long naps and just at various times. And that now they're having the difficulty of when they get to that normal kind of quote unquote bedtime, then they're not tired. So we're just trying to manage that so that it's not too much. So Often a winning strategy can be to lean into some of those kind of quote unquote power naps or like smaller amounts of time, in that 20-minute range, 25-minute range, some of that, certainly not going past, kind of ultradian rhythm of, 90 minutes for sure, unless with the asterisk that you're sick or, dealing with certain things that would, certain jet lag periods or what have you. So certainly what we're looking for is having that management of having it be a bit earlier on in the day so that it's not going to affect your nighttime sleep. And that can be really a winning strategy for a number of people. You can also lean into having that be with other relaxation techniques so that we are training our nervous system to be able to kind of at will calm itself once you get to the evening. So you can kind of pair those two. And that's, people will lean into hypnosis, yoga nidra, relaxation techniques, meditation, deep breathing, all of that. And it might kind of bucket into a nap period. And then the other group that can be a part of that napping paradox that might not make sense for at least a period of time to lean into naps can often be people that are dealing with insomnia, and we're trying to have a strategy to cultivate more of that sleep pressure because they have had that missing of that ability to feel that kind of routine and consistent tiredness at the consistent times and what have you. So that can be a period where it might make sense to kind of abstain from those naps for a period just to get ourselves kind of back on track and restore that rhythm. But it can be something really, really valuable for people to lean into. And I hear what you're saying when people are really, really struggling with their sleep, just to make it through that day is going to be crucial. Mm-hmm. And then on the restless leg syndrome side of things, it's such a fascinating area. I mean, there's even records that point back to this hundreds of years ago, people talking about twitching in the leg and, poetically speaking to it and how much that had, impacted the quality of their sleep. And that was before a lot of these types of drugs that your doctor might prescribe to you with restless leg now. And then other people might not get that either diagnosed, or they might not go deeper to get further tests to see, iron levels or different things that they can do from a holistic kind of perspective to make a difference there. And then I've seen different things with different clients, some being able to actually make the prescriptions workable that they've had for their restless leg and lean into that. And that's been sufficient for them. Other people that are avoiding that route and more going, even layering things like CBD oil in there, mm-hmm. layering magnesium issues, layering in some of the discussion around iron, IVs, all kinds of things that you can do to make a difference there. But it can be so upsetting for people. And I do think that the tracking can be really important for all of these conversations around our sleep, because then we can start to have some numbers behind us of what's working, what's not working, and start leaning into some of those to find that stack that works for that patient.
Yeah, it becomes like Uber sleep hacking at that point.
Yes. Yeah. A client of mine called it forensic sleepology. And she was like, this is crazy. Like, we're going back and forth. She's like, oh my God, that's right. I had the ice cream that night and then that flared up this. And then, just some of the things I think can be fascinating for people that would not have considered that those things can make, a number of things can make a difference for their sleep results. But on the positive side, it can put us back in the driver's seat so we can start to have a real cause and effect. And so much of, for me, I have a knowingness if I'm going to do X, then Y is going to happen for the most part of the results. So then I'm informed in my decision-making on some of these behaviors that previously I would have thought were totally unrelated to my experience with my sleep.
Yeah. And you bring up such a great point when you brought up the ice cream, because, and I'm sure you get your clients to do this, is tracking your food, because understanding how number one, there's meal timing for sure. We know is intrinsically, like it's completely bound into circadian entrainment, to your point.
Yes.
But also helping people to draw lines between, when I eat this, I can't get to sleep. Like for me, when I started years back tracking my sleep and understanding my story that, oh, well, I'm Mediterranean, so I don't eat until 9 o'clock at night or 8:30.
Yes.
And my poor British husband, who was used to eating at 6, going, really? And I think he kind of charming at the beginning of our relationship and eventually kind of got over that.
Yeah.
It's like, this really sucks. I can't wait to eat this long. Anyway, but finally, when I finally started to quantify my sleep and to measure my sleep and seeing how those late meals were trashing my deep sleep.
Yes.
But then taking it a step further with our clients and showing them that, oh, look, that sugar bomb you're having with dinner actually isn't working for your sleep.
Yes. Absolutely. I mean, it can be so eye-opening. So when people will, since every client we work with has that Aura ring, so that's part of the anchoring of what we're looking at to kind of see the behaviors, what's coming up, and on the dashboard that we have set up, it's like you can see little strips of the Saturday, Sunday, and how often that might have like big old spikes that come about. And it's not to say that some people have different schedules or whatever, but just there are commonalities, that there are certain things that just so deviate what their norm is. And then when we're able to point to, oh, that was the glass of wine and the pie or whatever. It's just so, while it can be a bad news insight on the front end, it can be really empowering on the back end, because now you get to choose and make informed decisions. There's also, this area of sleep optimization is so huge and projected to get even bigger. Even now, there just recently was a new ice cream. Speaking of ice cream line, literally called Night Food. That's meant to be backed by, it's meant to be backed by sleep, sleep doctors, sleep professionals, sleep researchers, to be this expert approved option for your food, for your sleep. Now, I do have questions around that, but
because you need to eat before you go to bed, apparently.
Right.
You couldn't possibly go 10 hours without food. God
exactly.
forbid.
I know. And that's and you're pointing to something great, which is, so one of the things that we lean into is testing with people, circadian rhythm, intermittent fasting. And so, that's really just fancy terminology for eating between sunrise and sunset. And now in the summer, that might be very doable. And then in the winter, for people, that might be new. Like, oh, wait, I'm stopping when? And shocking. Yeah, exactly. But then often when people do lean into this, they become to really, really like it. And when they start to deviate and they have, with social situations or whatever structure of its particular day, when they find themselves eating later, they feel the difference with their sleep and then the way they wake up the next day. So there can be a kind of a pull towards doing that and making that as much of a routine in their life as possible. The other one being early time restricted feeding. And that one's a bit more on the ending, more in the afternoon. So you're kind of flipping versus, most people say IF, intermittent fasting. It's like the assumption is it's always skipping breakfast.
Right. Which is not ideal.
Right. Which is kind of flopping and shifting that. And again, always using myself as an example, I did all the things before I had my sleep, I'm able to do this. So I can skip the breakfast. I'll even skip the midday lunch and then put all of those calories into that late part of the night, and having no concept of what that was doing to my sleep results. So again, I've been there, and and it's not great.
And it kind of sucks.
Yeah, kind of sucks. Exactly. So experimenting with that, and I think that's where the tracking can come in, because it can be so hard to. That's one of the fundamental problems with psychology, is that so many of us, even if we're in these conversations, we have a hard time of knowing, how do we feel? How are we and what source point? Where is this coming from? So when you have tracking, it gives you kind of a quantifiable external place to look and see, how was my heart rate, functioning throughout the night? How is my HRV? Clients that are coming in their 60s and 70s, and I'm working with, suddenly by the time that we're, working through our 90-day, kind of look at their sleep, suddenly they're talking about HRV all the time. And, they didn't even know what it was before coming in. And but it can be really life-changing. And so it provides this other route of looking at, of knowing or having a sense or signs that we might be getting more stressed than we realize before it kind of goes downstream and it's really more of a problem.
Yeah. And everything that you're saying, what I love about all of it, and it really comes back to, because, the other thing that people will say to me is, oh, I've become obsessed, or I feel like it's making me anxious to track. Yeah. And I think a lot of that has to do with how we help people to frame this. And it's about putting yourself in the driver's seat as opposed to being a passenger on a train going to where you don't want to go, kind of thing. And sometimes, look, there's the occasional personality. They have to put the tracking devices aside for a little while just to get over it. But what you keep talking about, which I think is so important for people to take away, is and it's embedded in sleep as a skill, which means it's a learnable thing, which means it is in your control, which means you get to decide, right? And I do think it's such an important message for people to take away. And this is not to diminish the hardships of people who really genuinely have insomnia and the struggles that they face. Because I've spoken to a few people in that boat, and hopefully they will find you through this podcast, because real insomnia it's debilitating. Like, you can't function through the day, you don't control your food, and it's breaking that cycle that's just really, really challenging, breaking it up. But the quantification, to come back to your point, is just, if we can frame it to people as a means of getting feedback and regaining control, becomes such a very powerful message for people.
Absolutely. And I think you're making such a great point. I mean, and I know also I can see the struggle when we don't have those tools to pull from, and it just feels like we're at the effect of these numbers, because, I don't know if listeners are familiar with, years back, there was this tracker called Zio. And so I'd had the Zio way back when. It was so ahead of its time. And it was ridiculous. Like, you wore it on your head. It looked kind of like, the Muse headband, but this was back in 2012 or something. And I would get these readouts, but I wouldn't know what to do with them. And I wouldn't have the skill set to make a difference with those numbers. And then it would be frustration. And then I had the nocebo effect of, now I got an F or whatever the grade was. And exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I eventually really did put it aside, because I found that it was just having that experience. And then shortly thereafter, I had my whole sleep breakdown. So, I had to figure it out.
Funny. Like, a sleep breakdown is a thing, right?
It's a thing.
It's an emotional breakdown.
It is. Because and that points it to that. And that's another thing that I'm really grateful for, that experience with. I never would have thought I would have said that at the time, but there's so much gratitude, because that symptom was a way of, really telling myself, from the body, really saying, okay, how you're managing life is not working. Like, it is just not working. And, and I think that when we do have some of these sleep disturbances, there can be something for us to really learn quite often about it. And one of the things that I've even had some clients, like longtime clients, begin to really love about this process is it can almost act as this way of evaluating what's working and what's not working in their life. Our life is dynamic, and there's going to be periods where things are, going with, we're living life with gusto, and other times when things might be resignation, cobwebs are growing on certain things that we thought were important to us. And, we're not taking, some of those steps that we probably, if we're really honest, know we need to make. And sleep can be some of that signaling process. So the more we track that, when we start to see, this is a common one too. We might have people that were doing pretty fine with their sleep, and now, now I'm starting to wake up at 3, 4, 5, and that wasn't happening there before. And what's going on here? And there can be some of that psychological elements of things. It can be a common sign for depression, or now we're having difficulty falling asleep, but a common sign for anxiety, or, and it can be often layered is, the other thing.
Or
Yeah,
hormones. It can be
right.
hormones as well, for sure.
Hormones, 100%. With the pandemic, I saw people leaning into alcohol more and more,
Yeah.
and that one can just obliterate our sleep results. Might lean into THC, might be other medications that we might be taking that might not be serving our sleep, and that ability to really have that sense of refreshment, because REM sleep is often thought of as almost like our inner therapist, because it helps us process the world around us. And if we're routinely not going through even that part, let alone deep sleep, then that can be problematic for how our even mental fortitude. And so I really think of it as a mental health parameter in many, many ways. And the last thing I want to say about tracking too is, even if you're in this conversation of technology, who needs that for sleep? The thing I want to just point out is that even years before these were options, some of the recommended steps to take if you were struggling with your sleep was to keep a sleep log or a sleep diary. So, even if you want to begin there, if that's something that calls to you and more of a low tech thing, you can lean into that. And I would also offer that what's so cool about some of these pieces of tech, are they infallible? No. Are they as good as, PSGs? No. Or PSGs even as good as some of us might think they are? No. So, there's all of these things, but what can be valuable about even having periods of time where we might track is that it can start to clear up a little bit of that fogginess around our perception of our sleep. Because often there's like the sense that, well, I think I went to bed at around, I don't know, it was 11 something. And then I woke up sometime and I don't know how long it was. And all of that can get a little bit more cleared up for us. So we have more clarity and can take more kind of concerted action.
Absolutely. And there's also that thing that happens with when you're tracking your sleep, that sometimes we think we've had a sleepless night, and for sure the sleep may have been disrupted, but you actually got more sleep than you thought you did. And your wearable will come back and inform you of that, which is interesting insight, because I think it's part of that anxiety that I don't think I got any sleep last night. And not that you need a wearable to tell you how much sleep you got, but it can give you some interesting insight and maybe alleviate some of that anxiety pressure. And
absolutely, because that sleep perception is it's a bit of a problem. I mean, there's something called paradoxical insomnia, in that if you bring a certain person in that's saying, I get no sleep whatsoever, and you hook them up to that PSG, and on the other side of it, it's like, oh no, you actually got whatever, 6 hours and stuff, and they will vehemently share, no, I was awake that entire time. Now there could be questions of the quality of that sleep, the amount that they were awake. There could have been, micro awakenings, micro sleep, all kinds of things going on to really look at. So not to diminish that, but that there can be a sense of what is reality and what is, what is really there, what's behind that. And one thing that is empowering about some of these trackers is that now, there are certain areas that they're known, that many of them as of right now in 2021 are not particularly reliable for. The one that I will often caution people on is the sleep stage classification. So, many of them when compared to that PSG will come up like a coin toss of accuracy. So those, and I'll get a number of people coming my way because of those numbers. They'll say, oh my God, I'm only getting 12 minutes of deep sleep and this, that, and the other. And so, you can use it as a bit of a within each wearable and not cross comparing the wearables, because that's a whole other mess.
That's a deep dark hole, because definitely BioStrap's position on sleep stages is very different.
Very different, than some of the others. So, but what they do tend to come up more favorably on is the binary of, are you asleep or are you awake? Now there might be some. So just that basic, which
let's just deal with that.
Let's just deal with that. Exactly. So did you get some sleep throughout the night? That can also often, just to your point, be really, really helpful for the psychology of things to know, all right, listen, maybe this wasn't my best night, but at least I got something. Versus this experience, because if not to have something like that to lean into, we might mistakenly have a bit of that catastrophizing thought pattern of, I got nothing, and will I get something tonight? I don't know, blah, blah, blah. So that can be really, really helpful for that process as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, listen, I think we could keep going for a really long time. I
I
know
think
that
so.
you have a finish line. So why don't we kind of wrap up and maybe we'll talk again. Maybe we'll do this again.
Yeah, right? Part two.
So much more to talk about, like supplements, routines, like the whole nine yards. And so maybe as we close, why would you be willing to share, and given the fact that there is so much more to sleep than
Yes.
taking an herb or a supplement. And I think that that's one of the biggest things we have to overcome when we're helping people optimize their sleep is it's not about the herbs and the pills can be helpful for sure, but it's about the routines. It's about the what's it called? The sleep
Fundamentals
hygiene,
and exactly.
Your environment, your light, all of those things. But there are a couple of supplements out there or herbs that can be helpful. So I'm wondering if you might be willing to share a couple of your favorites that you are willing to recommend even without knowing the person. And then after that, why don't you share with us your top 3 sleep tips that you'd like to leave people with before we
Sure.
start?
Yeah, no problem. And I would echo exactly what you're sharing too around the supplements. So what we have people lean into is what traditionally we'll start working on all of these behavioral shifts. So like on the pyramid of change, that there's so many of these elements that are often free and things that we can do step by step and that we want to do for many, many weeks and periods of time to start to entrain that circadian rhythm. So then we can actually lean into bringing in some of those supplements with a bit more knowingness of, are these working, are these not? Because, you can take a whole amazing stack of supplements, but if you're still not, you're drinking till 2-3 in the morning and, it's obviously going to have different results.
While playing poker online.
Yes, exactly. I know. I got my poker people to be mindful of. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So with that, once you have, ideally, I would be hoping that you're hopefully we made the argument for tracking. So you've got the tracking so you can see, is this making a difference? You've got all the awareness of these habits that you can bring in. Then you start folding in some of the supplements, and hopefully you've done some of the work like with someone like yourself so that you've done all these tests and that you have awareness for yourself of some of those clear supplements that are going to make a difference and supplements that aren't going to hinder your results. Because I've actually had some clients that are taking some of these supplements that could be negatively impacting their sleep, or they're taking the timing. And, so we want to be mindful of what we are taking. So to your point around, the kind of blanket statements for if we're not knowing the person, some of the things that I'm comfortable with for most people is certainly the magnesium, and so leaning into that magnesium glycinate is one of the recommendations that we make for sleep. Also taking that a bit earlier on in the night than I think a lot of people do, because we might relate to that as it's going to immediately make me sleepy, but it's meant to be kind of the relaxation, the calming mineral. So it's kind of having that ramp up period. And so we want to put that in earlier on in the evening. Then I have different recommendations for theanine and, some of these calming elements of things. Different mushrooms. So, bringing in some of that lion's mane or reishi and different, things that you can stack in there, all the rage at this point. I do have some clients that really swear by CBD and bringing that in and different stacking of that. And you certainly is like a testing with the amount for something like that. I will have clients, and this was another one that almost can fall in the domain of people thinking that this will help their sleep, being THC. And now that's a complicated one because there are times that would be preferable. Like if you're dealing with mega pain that you're, just can be really affecting your ability to fall asleep or stay asleep. And if it's between that or major, pain medications, then naturally we'd want to often lean into that kind of natural element. But There's clients that wouldn't fall into that category necessarily, and they're leaning into something like THC as they think of it as a supplement. It's natural. And, so that's going to help with their sleep. And yet often we'll see the quality of that sleep really shifting. So that can be another time when like more of a subtraction model versus an additive model can make a lot of difference there. And then sometimes also, I'll have people that are taking whole stacks of nighttime sleep like powders and, they've got all kinds of teas and all of these, but sometimes they might be bringing in things with that can often negatively impact their sleep. They might be sugary laden and right, then that's where the continuous glucose monitors can be really eye-opening for people. So we often will layer that in to see how their glucose is responding throughout the course of the night. Because if you are someone that's having wake ups, that can be another really important area to look at. So, I'd lean into some of those to begin. And then of course, aligning with someone, like yourself that's skilled to start to see what could be more specific supplements for you. If you're dealing with cortisol issues, hormonal imbalances. I mean, it's so layered. There's so much that we can go into for that.
Yeah.
And then for those top 3 tips, what I would say is a couple of things. One, it would be, I would also say that standing just in this concept or this context that sleep is a skill to begin can make all the difference for your results. Because if it is a skill, we allow ourselves to kind of test and experiment and learn and have a framework and, kind of bring things in and then have this expectation that this will be a long road, but in an exciting way, hopefully, is that we're, this is going to be kind of, dare I say, fun to explore, right? And
not eye-opening, eye-closing, as it turns out, but yes.
Yes, exactly. So it's something that if you're standing in that, then you're having much more likelihood of being strategic in your approach to things versus, because when we're just really desperate for sleep, we might try something 1-2 nights and say, oh, that doesn't work. It's thrown out. And that context can really be decisive. So standing in that, number 1. Number 2, not to be a broken record, but the tracking and, establishing a real metric or a number of metrics that we can get a sense of where we're at, where we've been, where we're at now, and then create a plan for where we're going. And also putting within that tracking, really getting familiar with HRV. I think that can be really eye-opening of all those metrics. Since it is a metric of recovery, it can give us a sense of how recovered we were throughout the course of that night, because it's nighttime HRV readouts or nocturnal readouts. So that can be really eye-opening. And then the final thing being leaning into getting that light right. And then, I know we didn't speak too much about it, but coupled within there is the temperature side of things, and knowing that both the light is, your light exposure throughout the course of the day is meant to shift, and from like bright amplitude of light during the day, and then a lesser amount in the evening to total blackout at night. And then same with the body temperature, that we want to have that be higher throughout the course of the day, and then having pretty significant drop in the evening of 2 to 3 degrees, which isn't a small amount for the body, consistently, and then facilitating that over time. So those would be, I think, the top 3. And then there's so much, else that you can dive into from that place.
For sure. No, I love that. And, on the body temperature side, I will say that one of the tools that I got that made the biggest difference to my sleep and heart rate variability numbers, my recovery, was, and the one that there's a few different ones on the market. The one I got is called the Perfect Sleep Pad. And it's just this little pad that goes, it's a very thin pad that goes under your top sheet, your bottom sheet.
Yes.
And there's water that runs through the tubing in this little pad. I'm sure you use it in your coaching.
Yeah.
And then there's a device that runs cold water through that device. And I keep my water at 65 degrees, which people are like, are you crazy? Don't you freeze? I'm like, you don't understand. Like, it literally, it's like a breath of fresh air underneath your body. Like,
absolutely.
That's all it is. But it makes such a difference in helping the body find that temperature of its own.
Oh, it's huge. Yes, absolutely. I use the Uller and similar
same
idea. And it can just be a game changer. And the only caution is that when you are like me and just, I was just traveling for the last 2 weeks.
It's the worst.
You want it back. You want it back. It's so nuts.
You need to find a portable device. Or if somebody were to open a hotel with something in those, I would choose that hotel over any other hotel.
Yes.
Literally. I was saying this to my husband. I was like, there's a business in this.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Bright Bed. So I'm actually going to be interviewing today. They're doing, they have these fancy pants beds that have a pad that you can select firmness and temperature and whatever. And they're in 5-star hotels now.
No.
Yeah, they're very cool.
I need connection to those guys.
Yeah, right? Yes, exactly. I totally hear you. Oh my goodness.
All right. Okay. Well, Molly, I think we could go on forever, but you do have a call at 1:00, which may be your own podcast indeed. So why don't we close this up? Why don't you tell people how they can find you and where they can find you and how best to reach out and find out more about your courses and your coaching? And
perfect.
Leave it
Absolutely.
At that.
So sleepisaskill.com can act as the bucket for all the things. And so there you can take a sleep assessment, get, kind of automatic feedback on what's happening for your sleep in particular. You can sign up for a weekly newsletter. So every Monday we aim to put out a really info-packed, rich, newsletter with lots of different things, both from kind of experimentation, stats, and sleep, studies and articles and all kinds of things in the realm of sleep. And then we also have our weekly podcast as well. And then if you are really struggling from perspective of wanting to have even next level up-leveling that skill set, then we have those cohorts and one-on-ones. And so all different kinds of offerings to make a difference going forward on your sleep to make that difference.
Great. So sleepisaskill.com, is that it?
Exactly. That's the spot.
And then Molly McGlockin on Instagram.
Yes, on Instagram. And even if you put in sleep as a skill on any of the social platforms, that should still come up from our hashtags and all that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I know we went a little over time, so thank you so much for your time and generosity today. It's been a great chat.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate the work you're doing, and I'm excited to be further connected with you. So more to come.
Likewise.
Awesome. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of the Biohacking Superhuman Performance Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, because that's what helps us to be heard and to be seen. If you'd like to connect with me directly, or if you'd like to leave any comments, or if you have any questions about this episode, please reach out to me directly through my website, natnidham.com. And of course, if you're not already a member of the Biohacking Superhuman Performance community on Facebook, that's where you'll find me every day. It's a short application, just answer a couple of questions, and you're in and interfacing with other amazing biohackers. Thanks again, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.